Hi, my name is Claude Beckett,
I'm Matt Jagodzinski.
and this is our presentation on KRACK Attacks. All right, so here are all of our sources. Mainly, we have a main research paper that we were focusing on, but we also listed a demonstration video that the main researchers did, as well as a lot of external links that we use for research while reading the paper. And just a quick disclaimer, all the diagrams and tables that are in this presentation are taken from the main KRACK Attacks research paper, which you can see a link to on screen now. All right, and here's just a quick outline of how our presentation is going to go. We're going to introduce you to some Wi-Fi security protocols that are being used now and in the past. Then we're going to introduce you to how the four-way handshake works. Then show you how the key reinstallation attack works on the four-way handshake. And Matt will go into more specifics with the plain text retransmissions and all of that. And then we'll go over some review questions for it. So with the Wi-Fi security protocols, first you got the WEP protocol, which is the wired equivalent privacy. It was introduced in 1999, and it utilizes encryption keys with an additional 24-bit IV. But basically, no matter the size of the key, it was the IV that was the real issue with WEP, because it could be used to figure out the key in a matter of minutes once people learned how to attack this protocol. So in 2003, researchers came up with WPA, which is Wi-Fi Protected Access, to replace WEP, and it prioritized TKIP, which would be the Temporal Key Integrity Protocol. It prioritized that data confidentiality protocol over CCMP, which was the counter mode of CPC MAC protocol, and was actually a more secure protocol. So they created WPA2 in 2004 to switch these prioritizations so that CCMP was used more than TKIP.
The four-way handshake was made in 2003 with the introduction of WPA. All of the packets for the four-way handshake are defined in EAPOL frames, which stands for Extensible Authentication Protocol over LAN. The four-way handshake begins after both the client and the access point have associated with each other and want to initialize keys and nonce values for secure communication. The first message in the four-way handshake will be sent from the access point to the client. It will contain the A nonce, the authenticator nonce value, which in combination with the S nonce, the supplicant nonce value, will be used to generate the PTK. The pairwise transient key. After the client derives the PTK, it will send the S nonce to the access point in the second message. When the access point receives the second message, it will derive the PTK and reply with the GTK, the group temporal key in the third message. When the client receives the GTK, it will respond with a fourth message acknowledging that it received the GTK, and it will then install the PTK and GTK and begin sending encrypted frames. After the access point received the fourth message, it will install the PTK as the GTK was installed when the access point was started. Of the confidentiality and integrity protocols used, it should be noted that only the temporal key integrity protocol and the Gauss counter mode protocol will allow packets to be forged under this attack. Under counter mode CPC MAC protocol, the packets cannot be forged and packets can be replayed and decrypted for all of them under this attack. The keys will be refreshed for existing connections, and there are variations on the attack to target the majority of key exchanges, but for this presentation we are only focusing on the attacks to the four-way handshake.
Okay, so now to get into the key reinstallation attacks, which is the main point of why they're called KRACK attacks, is key reinstallation attacks. The general concept, you're going to be forcing a nonce reuse by the victim through key reinstallation, which is then going to allow the decryption and injection under TKIP and CCMP. So basically, like Matt's going to go into it, but you're going to be going through the regular like four-way handshake or the group key handshake or whatever, and mainly it's going to be like repeating a certain part of the handshake, and when that happens, the key is going to end up being reinstalled, which is the opening for the attacker or whoever's trying to get into the system to either decrypt your key or go through some injection process with your key or any of those things through the TKIP and CCNP. And like I mentioned, the type of handshakes, you've got the four-way handshake, the group key handshake, peer key, and the fast BSS transition handshake. We're going to be mainly focusing on the four-way handshake here, but something to note in the table that you can see is that when you're looking at the table and you see all the different implementations, the group key handshake, you can see that all of these are susceptible to this type of attack, no matter whether you're on Mac or Windows or Linux, Android, any of them. The group key handshake can be susceptible to this attack. And it's really a big part of why the researchers had the goal of trying to make these attacks work, is you have to be able to find these vulnerabilities within these systems, especially within such a newer, well, not really new, but a more secure version of a security protocol like WPA2.
The first type of attack on the four-way handshake requires the victim to accept plaintext retransmissions of message 3. The easiest way to implement this is to use a man-in-the-middle attack, since you can control which packets will and won't make it through to the victim. Essentially, what will happen is the access point will send the first 3 messages through to the victim, and then it'll then block the 4th message from being sent back to the access point. Since the access point never received the 4th message, it will retransmit message 3 to the client. In the meantime, the adversary can collect all of the packets being sent by the victim and then retransmit the second message 3 from the access point to the victim, which will cause the victim to reinstall the keys and reset the nonce values back to the values it used when it first started encrypting frames, causing nonce values to be reused, which, depending on the protocol used, can allow packets to be decrypted and potentially forged. The second type of attack on the four-way handshake is similar to the first attack, but it will work on some implementations that know that they shouldn't accept retransmissions of plain text, but do anyways. The reason for this is due to the wireless NIC implementing the data confidentiality protocol and the main CPU implementing the four-way handshake. Due to the separation, there's a slight delay between the two, and this variation of the attack exploits that race condition. As an exception, Android and Linux will allow these packets to be accepted, even though it knows the message is unencrypted. Like the previous attack, the easiest way to implement this is to use a man-in-the-middle attack, since you can control which packets will and won't make it through to the victim. Essentially, what will happen is the access point will send the first 2 messages through to the victim, and it will then block the 3rd message from being sent to the client. Since the access point never received the 4th message, it will retransmit the 3rd message to the client. The adversary will then quickly send both message 3s to the client, causing the first message 3 to be processed and have the keys installed. It will then send encrypted frames until the second message is processed and the keys are reinstalled. It will then reset the nonce values and re-encrypt data frames, leading to the same problem created in the previous attack. The third type of attack on the four-way handshake is similar to the second attack, but will work on some implementations that only accept encrypted retransmissions. It should be noted that this attack also works for the implementations vulnerable to the second attack. This attack exploits the same race condition used by the previous attack, but targets key refreshes, instead of when the key was first exchanged, which typically occurs every hour or by request of the client. Essentially, what will happen is when the access point tries to refresh the pairwise key, the adversary will then detect this by looking at the length and destination of the packet, which is guaranteed to be the same for all of the packets in the exchange, since they are all defined in EAPOL frames. It will then block the 3rd message from being sent to the client. Since the access point never received the 4th message, it will retransmit message 3 to the client. The adversary will then quickly send both message 3s to the client, causing the first message 3 to be processed and have the keys installed. It will then send encrypted frames until the second message is processed, and then keys will be reinstalled. It will then reset the nonce values and re-encrypt data frames, leading to the same problem created in the previous attack. Another important vulnerability discovered by the researchers was that when keys were reinstalled on WPA supplicant version 2.4 and 2.5, which a slightly modified version is used for Android, led to a vulnerability where the temporal key was set to 0. This has since been patched in version 2.6.
And now to just check your knowledge and what you learned during this presentation. Here's some review questions to look over. And if you're really interested in KRACK Attacks, you can learn more by going to the website, crackattacks.com. There you'll find the paper along with a demonstration video, both of which you can see here. If you just want to go straight to the paper, we have the link here as well, and a quick citation just showing everything about the paper. And the demonstration video is specifically against Android and Linux, although I'm sure if you want to know about the attacks on iOS or Mac, you can check that out in the paper. So thank you for watching the presentation.